Welcome to the Blitz Growth Podcast. Listen in to learn how founders, entrepreneurs, and creators build and scale their businesses online. Let's get started.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Blitz Growth. We're going to be going over some great topics today. Here with my co-founder Kevin, and today we're sort of going to go over the starting of Hyax, how we came up with the idea, why we're even doing a second SaaS product, and if you should do a second one too, the importance of learning from your first one to apply those learnings to your second one. We're going to go over a bunch of ideas and ways that we validated our ideas, so you can kind of go through the process with us. So Kevin, let's start off by talking about why we're even doing a second SaaS product. Why would we put ourselves through that again?
Yeah, so I think what the reason was we had these other products inside Vyper, right? We had this sort of content upgrade product, and we realized that it was a good product, but it wasn't getting enough attention because it was sort of baked into Vyper. So the initial idea was to put this into its own product and try to market it differently, have a different pricing structure for it, because it was also like it had a different value prop than Vyper as well in regards to the pricing. So because of that, we decided to try to spin that out. And what happened was it ended up becoming a much bigger product than we had originally thought.
Yeah. So yeah, just to give the listeners an idea. So content upgrades essentially means that you put this form capture on your website. People will enter their email, phone number, or any type of information. And in exchange, we'll give them some type of content, whether it's a PDF, access to video, whatever it may be, recordings of stuff. And so we noticed that this product within Vyper, which we had built as our first SaaS product, did really well. So that's just what a content upgrade is. But yeah, Hyax developed into something much bigger than a content upgrade.
Oh yeah. So I think what happened was in the middle of development, we realized that that the UX of the original product, the new content upgrades version, wasn't great, and also we also realized that there was a lot of competitors on the market, and we again fell into this trap of like, this product isn't going to be good enough to become a big business, in my opinion. What did you think about that?
Yeah, so I think the main realization was that we were building something that wasn't essential. So
right.
One of the biggest issues with Vyper that we have is that it's not essential to someone running their online business. And so we started going down this path of developing, the content upgrade version of Hyax. And, we realized, I think it was actually after we got some feedback from some other people as well, that this probably wasn't the best product. And again, reflecting on the product and what the end use was, it also wasn't essential. So I think those two things were kind of the tipping point of when we decided that we needed to pivot Hyax into something a little bit more valuable than just content upgrades.
Yeah, because on the development side, it was kind of tough to do the development, and we kind of figured if we're going to do something like tough and like kind of step away from Vyper, it's better just to go all out, right? Like why spend a lot of effort on something that's not going to make a huge impact? Whereas this, with the new version of Hyax, it's definitely a lot harder to build, but we do think that it's going to have a much bigger impact than just a content upgrades builder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think just to backpedal for those wondering how the ideation stage went, how the naming went, we'll go through a few of those on what we did with Hyax. So,
yeah,
essentially the idea from it stemmed from something that we had already built and seen traction in. If you don't have an app, and maybe this is your first app, or maybe this is your first business that you're starting, you can find other places to find things that have traction. So you can look at forums, you can look at, influencers, what sort of products they're using, what sort of topics they're talking about. You can get ideas from other places as to what might be a good product or what is needed, because everybody has problems, and the good products solve big problems, whereas products that don't make as much money solve small problems. So really think about but again, as I say that, the bigger the problem, the harder it is to solve. So as I say that, you really got to think about, okay, what niche do I want to go after first? And then I think you've got to look at what are the problems in that niche, and how can I solve some of those problems? So, the problem that we were solving with content upgrades was growing your email list and getting better conversion rate from your blog traffic or website traffic to your email list. Now, that's a pretty small problem. Now, the problem that we were solving with Hyax is, a fully super well built out platform that you can build your sales funnel, landing pages, you can build your course, and you can build your membership site. Because these are 3 areas that content creators and business owners need to develop custom and personalized experiences for their followers to then monetize. Because there are options on the market, but we feel like there's areas for improvement which we're hopefully going to fill the gap on. But what do you think about finding problems to create products around and how to go about that?
Yeah, so finding problems, I think that's kind of tough too. I think you start with what problems do you have yourself, or what problems you've encountered in the past. Like for Hyax, the current iteration of Hyax, it was I've actually been in sort of like the digital space, digital product space, right? So I knew that it was a big problem to deal with the digital delivery of files, the payment exception, like in creating landing pages and stuff like that. Because previously I had used WordPress with a couple of plugins baked in, but then I had a lot of issues with that around having a consistent experience and having like random upgrades break the site and stuff like that. So it just wasn't a very seamless tool to use. So when I thought of like how to build Hyax, I just wanted to become a seamless experience for the user. So that someone can just come in, start building a membership site or a course right away, and have it all be in one builder that's easy to use.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, the other big problem that we're solving is the amount of customization you can do in your courses. So as you look at these guys like Thinkific, Teachable, and all of these kind of course platforms, they all look exactly the same. There's not much customization you can do to them. There's not much personal touch you can put into these. So I think that was another problem we were solving. So for the guys who want to make, or girls that want to make courses or even lessons that are a little bit more like higher level than just the basic kind of play this video, look at this description.
Yeah. I think it was like, I think the problem with the courses right now, like you said, is just they don't look as good. And then if you're a marketer and you want to use this as like something that wows the audience, it's very hard to do that with the current solutions out there. We kind of saw these people that were making these custom built courses, and they were, coding themselves. And I was like, whoa, those courses make so much bigger impact than just these courses that are built off of like Teachable. So how do we bring that ability to more people to build custom builds and stuff like that? So that was for the courses feature. That's like a big part of what we wanted to do. So just reflecting on that. So Hyax, was really built around, solving a few problems, but those problems were much bigger problems than we originally thought out till when we started doing the content upgrades version. So if you are starting your own company or own business, think about those problems. Think if they're a big enough problem that it's actually going to make sense to invest a lot of time and money into, because, it does take a long time to do this. It does take a lot of work. So definitely make sure that the problem is big enough and profitable enough for you to actually benefit from. Because I think that was one mistake we made with Vyper. It's very saturated and the problem isn't that big. So the growth of that was capped. And that's, one of the main reasons why we started our second project. Yeah. And then the other part to that is with Vyper being the first product, and we got it to a decent level, but then it was capped, like you said. With Hyax, we wanted a product that had a little bit more potential as well. So that's why we chose to go for a harder product to make. If you're doing just your first product, like let's say you're a beginning coder, or you're a coder but you haven't done any products, the simpler product is probably the better one to do, because you're going to be learning a lot from that project and stuff that you can take on for your next project. It's hard when people go into that first project doing something that's extremely difficult, requires a lot of staff to code up stuff, requires a huge team. And that's when a lot of those end up failing.
Yeah. So your recommendation is to start small on maybe 1 or 2 projects, and then get your footing, and then take on bigger projects or bigger problems. And I sort of agree with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's people who can get a home run right off the bat, but it's very rare, especially nowadays when the software market is a lot more saturated too. So that there's a lot of competitors out on the market. Like maybe in the infancy of the internet, or like a few years into the internet, like it was a lot easier to just get a home run right off the bat. But I feel like right now, if you're in SaaS, it's definitely pretty hard.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think those companies that are hitting it out of the park on a home run, they're kind of like inflated with, venture funds or accelerators and that sort of stuff. So it's even harder if you're looking to bootstrap it and hit it out of the park, because there are a lot of competitors out there who are just kind of trying to copy your features, hint, Facebook.
Yeah, and then not only that, but then they can, if they have a big team and you have a small team, they're going to iterate faster than you. They can easily copy your features, like like what all these products are doing. Especially in like the B2B SaaS market, it's a lot easier to kind of copy people. Whereas like I think with like Facebook and TikTok and those platforms, like they do have the community, which is hard to replicate. So they have that competitive advantage. But then if your product is based not off of a community, but like just a direct to sale business product, then it's much easier for someone to just take your features. And we've kind of seen that, right? Like every market has so many copycats.
Yeah. So in your opinion, how do you protect yourself from that? If you're a business owner, whether you're developing software or whether you're developing content, because the same thing goes for content. People copy topics, ideas, these keywords that people are constantly trying to outrank each other. How do you think? What do you think the best way of going about protecting your product or content is from competitors?
Right. So there's ways to do it, right? So one of them is different products have what is called like different moats around them. So like our friend who made Topaz Labs, right? His competitive advantage is like he has his machine learning stuff going in, and he has, tons and tons of sort of like, what's it called? Like just basically he has so much data on these images. So he's able to create, he has sort of that competitive advantage of all this data, right? And so does like Google. They have a ton of data. Their search platform's no longer that great anymore compared to other platforms. It was at the beginning, but now like all the other search platforms are basically the same in terms of technology. What they have now though is they have the data to sort of have a huge business within their advertising space, right? So it just you build these kind of competitive advantages, and like things like TikTok has the competitive advantage of their own user base that's like very, very into specific types of things. And usually these are like weird things like dances and stuff that like a lot of the mainstream platforms don't have, right? LinkedIn has the business network. Facebook has their network. And this is more sort of a general overview, right? It's not necessarily tied just to B2B SaaS. If you are in B2B SaaS, I think the main competitive advantage is the brand. If you have a great brand, that's a huge competitive advantage, because then you're known as like, oh, these guys are reliable. These guys are the ones who have been doing this for a while and they have a good product. So I think that's the main thing. What do you think?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, speaking to the word of mouth as well. So it's like if people have a really good experience with your product and people get really good results, I think that like ripples throughout the B2B industry. So if you're in marketing, you probably know a lot of the same products, a lot of the same people, a lot of the same influencers. So word travels very fast, whether something's good or bad. So I think, you know, creating something that's of high value that generates results for your customers is definitely a great competitive advantage, but at the same time, people can copy that. But if you're consistently doing that, and you do get first mover advantage on new features. So if you come out with something, you know, and you've already got a user base, and those people use that feature and tell a bunch of other people, that's going to attract an influx of new users who want that feature. Now you might give it a month or two, and someone might replicate that, but you've already been known for developing that feature or that skill. And so as you keep doing that and you keep iterating, I think you definitely do create, as you were saying, a much stronger brand, and you're known as the innovators. But yeah, I would say, you know, the other thing is like owning your customers is a massive one. So your user base, your customer base, you know, having an email list or having a database of customers, you know, something that someone can't copy or take from you. So definitely building those up from as early as possible. And then, you know, one space that I have seen that is pretty defendable is SEO. You know, once you start ranking for stuff, your kind of pedestal gets further and further out of reach as you're there for longer and longer, and as you keep updating your content, and as you keep maintaining that search ranking. I do think that is a more defendable marketing initiative than, say, for example, ads, because ads are very easy to replicate, and then you can just target the same audiences. So there's very, very low barrier to entry on that one.
Yeah. I think the word of mouth thing, I think, that fits right into the brand. The other thing to note is, like, I don't think you need to be that worried about the brand, or sorry, not the brand, but your competitors as much, because, like, I think we saw with Vyper, especially if you just have a small business and you just want to keep it like kind of small and lean, like we had a ton of competitors, and it doesn't really matter. You can still just get a few people that like your particular way of you building the product. And certain people just, for example, liked how our product looked, or liked all the different options, various options that we had. And then, you know, even though we have, you know, probably like 50 competitors who are doing very similar things, like you still get that group. So you just want to slowly grow it, and then over time you just have more and more people, and there's an infinite amount of customers for you to get. So it's not a huge issue. I think it becomes more of an issue when you're trying to build like a platform like Facebook or something, where you have to have every user in order to have a profitable business, right? Because or Snapchat's a good example, because they're just losing. If they lose all those viewers, then their stock price just drops, right? So.
Yeah, so if you're an entrepreneur or creator that's starting out, don't worry about it. Just create, and
just do your best, and then if you make, you'll get an audience if you just make something, and then from there you can kind of iterate and see how you can see where you can go into in terms of how big your product's going to be, like whether you're going to be just a small product or like a bigger product.
Yep. Yeah, and I think, just to wrap this up, a few other ones are, you can look at, the service that you provide in terms of customer support, onboarding, education, accessibility, all of these other things that you can kind of do that gives you a bit more of a personal touch than maybe some of your competitors. That's another way to do that. But yeah, so let's go back to Hyax quickly. So just for those who are thinking about starting a new company, a new brand, and they're trying to do some name brainstorming. So we spent probably 3 to 4 weeks trying to come up with a name, trying to lock in our domain, and going back and forth whether paying 5 figures for a domain was worth it or not. So let's dive in, and I'm going to ask you the question. What's some tips on when you're naming whether it's your business or your SaaS product? What would you say are some good tips?
Yeah, so let's see. The name is very hard. I think there's like a few different ways to name something. There's like the way we did it was just come up with a random word that that isn't really being used, and then we just use that. There's also people who try to like use like maybe combine two words into one that are like relevant to the product. And so there's a few you can do it that way as well. And that's kind of a good way to find unused names. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard. You just have to keep kind of scrolling through and seeing if those names are taken or not. Right?
Yes, I think this was a big thing because with Vyper, we had a lot of issues with Vyper being a very common word and getting used in so many different applications. So it's hard to trademark, it's hard to protect, and you know, other brands that are in different verticals can kind of outshadow you. So, you know, there was a Vyper in the fitness space, there was a Vyper in the crypto space. You know, there was a lot of different Vypers out there, which was a little bit confusing for some people, I'm sure. So don't try and pick something that's too common, but also don't pick something that nobody can say.
Right.
So there's kind of like a balance there. And I think the other thing that we really valued was a short domain and a short name. That was definitely high on our priority list, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, since we were going to try to go for like a unique name, we decided to just go for like a 4-letter.com. And I mean, the pros to that was, it's, you know, it's a 4-letter. It gives you a little bit more authority as a website because people know that the 4 letters are more expensive. But at the same time, like if you're not making much, and you can't really drop that much money, then it's not really necessary either. But for us, we also just saw that name and we were like, okay, that seems like a pretty good name, right? So,
you know, I think in the process we bought about like 50 other domain names, didn't we?
Yeah, we did buy like a lot of other ones that we thought were kind of good, but then that one was just the one that we thought was the best out of all those.
Yeah, that was definitely the most expensive one. So if you're starting out, probably don't invest a ton of money in your domain. If you get traction, and maybe it's worth buying a better domain and rebranding. If it's your second or third project, you know, maybe worth also investing in a shorter name and a better domain. Also in terms of, you know, we really want to have a .com, but you know, you don't have to have a .com. You can look at .ios, .ais, all these different types of domains. Like, you know, anything in gaming is .gg. So you don't have to have the .com either. It just does make it a lot nicer when you can have the .com and be the kind of like the main brand with the .com, because it's very hard once you get big to go and buy back a domain as opposed to start with it. Because, you know, if Google had .ai and not Google.com, I'm sure the person who owned Google.com would be charging quite a lot for it. So, you know, think about what the potential growth of your company is and if it's worth investing in that domain or not.
Yep, totally.
Okay. Next question I had was, so Hyax is a pretty big app. So how did you go about planning out the development side of this? Was it kind of just a build as you go, or was there more planning involved? Did you whiteboard it out? Did you use any tools to plan it out? How did you sort of go about it? Because I know it's hard and very daunting when you're looking at such a big project and you're like, okay, well, where do I start? Where's, like, you know, what's day one look like?
Well, we wanted to be feature parity with a lot of the other products out there that were in the similar niche than us. And so I was like, okay, well, because it's kind of hard to compete with the other products unless you're at close to feature parity, in my opinion. Because otherwise it'd be very easy for someone to just choose a different competitor, especially if you're priced around the same. This more applies to markets that do have already competitors in the market. Like if you're trying to build something new, this might not really apply. So for me, I was just like, okay, what are the main features that we need to build to be on close to feature parity with all of these other products, right? And then, so I just mapped those out, and I'm using like Hubstaff. I used to use Trello to do that. and then I kind of take it by what's like the core functionality, and then I branch out from there. So I finish the core functionality of every little piece, and then I build the UX around that. So basically the first part is like very rudimentary. It looks bad, it looks ugly. And then the next part I would start refining all the pieces so that it's usable for the end user. So kind of a good overview.
Because I know the other thing, as we've been using the product more and testing it more, we've found out things that we want to add or things we want to take away. I think it's good to keep up that testing and keep using your product at each stage of that, because it would have been possibly not as good if we had kind of just like built everything and waited to then start testing. Because there might have been a bunch of stuff that we ended up spending a bunch of time on that didn't really matter. And then there might be small little things that we missed that were pretty essential to that product set or product feature.
Build your MVP in like 1 month. That's the goal.
Okay.
Anything more than that, then you're doing too much.
Okay, so that was most of the questions I had from my end. I think one of the big ones is how to vet ideas. So, we do have a few people asking questions about how do you come up with the ideas, which we sort of went over with finding a problem and that sort of thing. But then once you come up with a bunch of ideas, how do you sort of vet those ideas to increase your chance of building something that's actually going to be successful? Because we all know that there's millions, if not billions of ideas out there. The amount that get executed on is relatively small, but then the amount of ones that get executed on that are successful is even smaller. So what would be some of your tips for vetting ideas?
Let's see. I mean, I have a lot of ideas in the back of my mind for stuff, especially like in the future. But I kind of look at it as like first of all, I look at like, what are we capable of too, because just because, let's say for Vyper, right? It was just me and you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So at that time it was just me and you, right? So there wasn't much that we could do with those limited resources. Now we have a little bit more resources, so we can actually do something bigger. We have, a staff of like around 6 to 8 people helping with Hyax now. So we have a lot more that we can do. And then with that being said, it's kind of like this is more on the development side. So maybe you can talk more about the marketing side or sort of like the product validation side. But yeah, on the development side, it's just, seeing the capabilities of what you can do. How fast can you do it? Because if you need to learn a bunch of different things to add to create this product, then maybe you need to think of something that is a little bit easier to create. Or if you think it's all doable, then just do it. Like for us, for example, like we would never have gone into like doing a virtual reality startup, for example, because that's just too much for us to learn. You know what I mean? Even though that's like a great niche, but that's actually something that I want to do in the future. I would love to be in the virtual reality space, but like we don't have enough resources to do something like that. So so that's how I kind of came up with like what is possible on the development side. What about you?
So I think it comes down to that big controversial question that people have is, whether you should share your idea with others or not before you've launched. So, some people are saying, no, I should keep this all a secret so that people don't copy me. And then some people are like, no, get it out in front of everybody, as many people as possible, so they can give you feedback and squash any bad ideas. So I think the main way to validate your product or your idea is to talk to the potential customers. Ask if it would be valuable, ask if this is some problems that they're having, and see if your product matches the problems that they're having, or see if your product is possibly going to be a solution to those problems that they're having. Now, this is why it's easier to enter a market that already has competitors in it, because you already know there's a problem there. And so what I suggest is that you kind of do a little bit of both. So look at the competitors for sure, understand the market, see where there's opportunity in the current marketplace, and then also talk to customers and see if some of the ideas that you have to put a unique spin on what's already in existence, see if that would be better or worse for them. So, an example of this might be, there's a product maybe that does something specifically. And then you go to the customers of that product and you're like, hey, what do you wish this thing did? Or what do you wish this thing didn't do? And then kind of come up with a big list of all the things that people like and dislike about all the competitors. And then see if your product is going to be better than that and see if it can address some of those. So this is like very in-depth.
Well, give me an example of that. Give me an example. Mm-hmm. How would you do that in practice? All right.
So say,
let's say I'm running Hyax. What are you going to come to me and say?
Okay. So wait, you're running Hyax or I'm running Hyax and you're a user?
I'm running Hyax and you want to pitch me a product.
Okay. So
how would you do it?
Okay. So say we were doing this for Hyax. All right. So what I would do is we would look at our competitors, which have done, identify what those products and features are, identify what the good things and the bad things are about those. And then what we want to do next is go to people who would potentially buy this. So that's YouTubers, that's content creators, that's maybe B2B, people who already teach courses, that sort of thing. And go to them and say, okay, I notice you're using Thinkific, or I notice you're using Kartra or something. What are the things you like and what are the things you don't like? So, like one of the features I did talk to one person about Kartra was like, he really likes Kartra, he likes the build of it, but he hates the booking system. He can't find any calendar system that integrates well. Kartra has their own built out and doesn't work very well. And that's really important to him. And now he's having to put something together with like Zapier and Calendly to try and make that work with his Zapier integration. So what you could do is you could say, okay, that's a really important feature, but you would want to make sure that feature is actually going to be, valuable enough to make people choose, Hyax over Kartra. So that's what I mean by that example.
Yeah. So that would just be one way of finding out how to differentiate from competitors. And that would be like basically the problems of all the competitors. And then you would sort of solve a lot of those issues. Exactly. Right. And that's kind of what we did. That's kind of the way that we did approach things, I would say, is we saw that, for example, we saw that there was sort of a absence of these like course builders that could create like good looking courses. And then we also found that, on my end, I also found that the Shopify wasn't really good for digital products. It was mostly geared towards physical products, right? So we decided to sort of make Hyax into the Shopify for digital products.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, the other thing is that we've run a bunch of ads for companies and that sort of thing as in the e-commerce space. And so we know a lot of their problems. And one of the biggest problems is, how do I increase my average order value? How do I increase my lifetime value? So, one identification of a problem that Shopify users have is the order bumps and the upsells. Shopify does not do that very well. So we sort of came up and said, okay, so what's the easiest way we can integrate upsells and order bumps into Hyax and make that a point of differentiation and to reduce the friction for adding those types of things? Because if that's really important to a business owner, maybe they only have one product in their store, and increasing that average order value is really, really important, then they might go with something like Hyax over something like Shopify just because of that order bump and upsell feature. So identifying problems like that. But the other thing is, you can't get too granular with this because you could end up doing this for years.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think we kind of got into that issue where we started just adding a bunch of features into Hyax, and it was all like stuff that, like literally what you just said, it was all just stuff that we saw that Shopify and other products didn't have. And so we're just like, all right, they don't have upsells, they don't have order bumps, they don't have all that. They don't have digital products, they don't have courses, they don't have all that. So, and that's how we built out Hyax, just to solve a lot of those problems. Yeah. I think that's one way of doing it. Let me present a counter argument that I thought was really interesting. Because I just saw this talk by Peter Thiel You know who that is by chance?
Yep.
Peter Thiel. He's like an investor. He's first investor in Facebook, and he created that book 0 to 1. He said that all the billionaires who made all the biggest tech companies, they didn't get any validation. They just do it their way. Isn't that crazy? They basically, he said, like 90% of those people are just guys with Asperger's who just have a vision of the world, and they just go to create that vision, and they just to get no validation whatsoever. Isn't that crazy? That's a good thought, though.
Yeah. Well, I think if you want to change an industry and you want to be the first mover, I think for sure, Google was the first of its kind. Facebook was the first of its kind.
Well, no, those weren't the first of its kind. I wouldn't say, like Facebook and Google.
That's true. Like there were social networks before, and there were search engines before.
Yeah,
I think they reinvented it to the point of, taking it from like beginner to actually advance. Like, none of them have had such a long reign as those guys who were successful in it. But I think they still did probably look at what's already on the market and, take some of those for sure. Talking about that first point about looking at competitors, but then they improved it.
Right. So actually Peter Thiel in the talk was saying, what's more important than first mover advantage is last mover advantage. Because he was saying that Facebook saw what MySpace, Friendster, and all those things guys were doing, and they saw a better way to do it. But he said the way to do it that way is your thing has to be 10 times better than the previous thing. Yeah. So,
no, that makes sense. You have to have something unique. Otherwise, there's no reason for people to swap. People like thinking about when everybody swapped from Hotmail to Gmail. Like the reason was I remember swapping to Gmail, and it was just like seamless. It was super easy.
It's a way better product.
Super fast, really easy to set up. Everything was clean, easy to read. I didn't get any spam. Their product probably was 10 times better. You're right.
The other thing too is like on the development side, UX is so important. Like if you have the best design product, that can be a huge advantage when people are deciding things. So like there's all these products that are like very, very powerful. Like remember Infusionsoft? And that one was like considered to be the most powerful one, but it was so confusing that people called it Confusionsoft. Right? So that was like it was still a big product, but that allowed these smaller competitors to get into the market and use a really well-designed product and have a slice of that market, even though they didn't have the same power. Yeah. So that was that was an interesting point.
To the point where they had to rebrand. They had to literally rebrand, to avoid that kind of persona that they had built for themselves. Which is a way to pivot out of that, definitely. But it's better if you don't have to do that.
Yeah. They just because if you think about it, there's so many ways that you can do something similar. Because there's enterprise software right now that's still clunky to use. So if you can make the easy to use version of that software, then that could be a niche for you to get into.
Yeah, so I think the main takeaways in ideation and validation of product is, look at what the competitors are doing, look what's already out there, think about how you can 10x the value or 10x the performance, output, value, or whatever it is that you're kind of looking as your metric of success. You got to 10x that, and then try and build something around that. And I definitely do think there's some companies that don't validate it at all, but I'm sure to some extent Facebook, Google, and all those other guys were doing some sort of kind of data collection analysis to figure out what features were working, what features weren't, where and which direction it should go in. But that was more talking about the early stages. I think when Peter Thiel, once you get data and once you have customers, it's a whole different thing. I think you will use data points to figure out your best decisions and stuff. Yeah. And I think that's probably more valuable information, because when you're just asking people questions, they they're giving you answers, but those answers might not necessarily be true without a dollar value attached to it. So, you know, when someone is just getting an interview about a potential product that they might use versus a product they're paying for and using, your answer is going to be very different, I think, between, you know, hypothetical and then actual in reality, the practical use of it. So I think either way, getting customers is a good way to go about it.
Yeah. And then the other problem, and there's so many problems that arise with all this, right? Because the other problem that kind of arises is you never know which piece of customer feedback you need to follow versus like which you don't want to follow, because it might complicate your product. So you kind of have to think about that aspect too, because there's so many different feature requests that we get at Vyper that we don't follow through with because they would be very good for one person, but then bad for the general audience because it's going to overcomplicate the product. So really you want to make sure that your own product is very easy to use first before you start adding all these like requests.
Yeah. And I think that's also a matter of kind of like looking at the demand of it. So, you know, if you have 50% of your customers wanting a feature, probably a good indication you should build that feature. If you only have like one person requesting that, then it's probably, not very important.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you have to think of that as well. I think that's a factor. But then there's also issues where a lot of people want something that, you know, that doesn't really fit in with your product as well. And there's a lot of examples of that.
Okay. So to wrap up the validation, you know, I think the main things and the main call outs are, you know, just build, start off by just taking the first step, think about the core product and then build out around it. In terms of validation, look at the competitors, build out product parity and then 10x improve those. And then as you have information coming from interviews and surveys as well as customers, you know, take each one with a grain of salt and really focus on what's going to actually improve the product, not just what the customers want. Of course, it's good to take in customer data and give customers what they want, but, you know, make sure it's in the best interest of the product development as well. Anything I kind of missed from there, do you think?
No, I think that's all a good summary. And the other thing too that I want to stress is that every situation is so different from everyone else's situation. So just because we did it this way doesn't mean you have to do it that way as well. This is more of sort of like an outline of how we did it, more so, right? Versus like what you have to do.
Yeah, well, with Vyper, for example, we didn't do any kind of validation really. We just kind of launched it and got some customers, and then that's kind of where it started.
Right.
So yeah, you know, you don't want to get into like, you know, planning something out for 10 years before building it. I think, you know,
I would still prioritize just executing on something over validating, because validating, you could just be validating forever and someone else will take your idea and run with it.
Yep. So. I think the person with the idea doesn't always win. It's usually the person who executes on the idea. But always, I think. If you are a creator or entrepreneur and you're looking at starting your business, whether it's building apps, creating content, creating courses, membership sites, you know, there's a huge array of things that you can now do online to monetize your skill sets, monetize your audience. So, you know, hopefully this has helped you with the ideation stage of your product or business. Hopefully it's kind of helped you decide on your naming and remember to keep it short, keep it unique if possible. Buy .coms if you can, but it's not essential. So hopefully this has all helped with that ideation stage and taking that first step. Make sure that you follow along, subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review. Let us know what you want to talk about, what you want us to talk about. If you have questions, definitely send them in, whether it's to do with marketing, development, starting businesses, anything you can possibly think of. Send it in, and I'll be reading it to see if we'll cover that topic. But we want to hear from you, what you want to hear about and what you want to learn about. We'll be introducing some actual business owners, startup founders, and creators in the next few weeks. So, join to hear those stories, see how people are getting their first 100 customers, how they're making their first $1,000, different types of monetization strategies they have. So get excited for some of those guest interviews. I'm really looking forward to them. I really hope to hear you or see you on the next podcast.
Awesome. Talk to you later.
Bye.
If you like the show, remember to share it with friends and coworkers. You can also check us out and share past episodes at blitzgrowth.com. Hit subscribe and leave a review letting us know how this podcast has personally helped you and your business. If you have any topics you'd like us to cover, make sure to send us an email via blitzgrowth.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on our next episode.